Hey everybody, it's Mike Peasall, pastor at Gateway Christian Center in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. Today is Wednesday, June 21st, and this is Mike's Midweek Message. I hope you guys are having a great day. Today, my topic is seasons of training, seasons of rest, and seasons of assignment. In 1965, the Byrds, they weren't very popular for very long, but they were popular for a few years. In 1965, they had a hit song called "Turn, Turn, Turn." I looked up some information about it because a lot of us remember that song from goldradio.uk.com. It says this: "Turn, Turn, Turn" was written by Peter Seeger. With the folk, he was the folk icon putting it together in the 1950s. It was released by the Limelighters in 1962, and then, but most people remember it by the Byrds. The actual lyrics are the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, if you were wondering. Jim McGinn, or Gwynn, had arranged it for Judy Collins in 1963, and his band performed it on their tour bus as a favor to his future wife, Dolores, immediately making it his own and deciding to record it with the band. He won the approval of Peter Seeger and topped the U.S. charts while he was at it. Now, it's kind of funny that in the 50s and 60s, when he wrote this song, and then when the Byrds made it so popular, most people understood, oh, you know, that sounds familiar. That sounds like, I think that's in the Bible somewhere. And sure enough, they would realize that it was pretty much word for word quoting Ecclesiastes chapter 3. You know, I wonder about today, how many people would recognize those lyrics as something that was coming from the Bible. There's so many times we think there's stuff in the Bible that's not in the Bible, and there's stuff that is in the Bible that we think, oh, well, you know, somebody, John F. Kennedy said that, or whoever. So our biblical knowledge may have gone back. But let me read that to you. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 through 8. "For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep and a time to speak, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time for peace." So there are seasons in everybody's life, and not all seasons line up, and not all seasons are really neatly where you're either working or resting or training. But those are basically the three seasons of every person's life. There's a season of training, there's a season of rest, there's a season of assignment, there's a season of learning a trade, and then applying that trade, and then in between there's times of rest. You know, the average age of retirement, I think, for us is getting farther and farther into the future. We're living longer as part of it, and our economy is weird, so people aren't able to afford to retire like they once were. And there's a lot of stuff going on there, but we can't forget that there are supposed to be seasons in our life. And sometimes, even in your day, there should be seasons in your day. There's seasons of training, there are seasons of assignment, and then there are seasons of rest. Everybody needs all three of those seasons. Now, you might be in a prolonged time of rest because you've just retired, or maybe it's your vacation, and so you get a more condensed time of rest. Or you're at a part in your life where you're just developing a new skill, or you're going back to learn new skills. And so there'll be an intensive time of training, but we want to keep our lives balanced. That's the way we're designed by God. You know, he said that 6 days we should work, and then the seventh day we should have a day of rest. So this is really important because if we don't rest, we end up being so tired and so weary and so burned out that we become way less effective. A well-rested person is going to be way more effective than a person who's tired and worn out and worn down. A trained person is going to be more successful than an untrained person, a person who takes time to learn the craft, who learn to learn a skill, to develop a new ability. That person is going to be more available and or more valuable and be able to accomplish more because of that training. And then a person who works, we do live in a society where people are actually rewarded for not working, which is not the way we're designed to be. A person who doesn't work, you know that when you spend the day working, you will rest better that night than you have in a long time. If you do physical work or mental work or emotional work, though it tires you out, which is what that's part of the process. You get tired from doing all these things, whether it's an emotional or physical thing or a mental thing. You get tired and then you rest, and then the next day you're even better at what you're doing, what your assignment is. So each of us have an opportunity to learn, to train. Each of us has an opportunity to work, to work on a project or to develop a skill or a ministry. And then each of us desperately needs to have a proper amount of rest. Benjamin Franklin was the one who he's given some people say he said this, but I don't know. It's funny. You could find five other people said this quote. But Benjamin Franklin is said to have said, he said, there'll be plenty of time to rest when you're dead. Well, I know a lot of people who that's kind of their mentality. It's like, well, I'll rest when I'm dead, but right now I'm going to just work as hard as I can. And you can get a lot done, but not in longevity, not in overall. You're going to get less done because you don't take the time to rest, or you don't take the time to train and to be trained. So in the book of James, he talks about a farmer there. And he talks about how we're supposed to get the lesson of the farmer, the lesson of the farmers. The farmer at some point has learned how to farm, probably from his father, probably from his family. He's learned how to farm. And then he goes about the process of farming. And then he trusts God to do the actual growing. And then he rests until it's harvest time. And I know if you're a farmer, you're saying, well, I don't know that we rest all that much. But there's a time of intense work in planting. There's a time of intense work in harvesting, and in between those, you find seasons of rest. So not all season of rest comes at the end of an assignment. Sometimes it comes somewhere in the middle, and you have to kind of work that in. But then, if you look at the letter of 2 Timothy, right now we're studying 1 Timothy at our church, and we're going to get to 2 Timothy in a month or two. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, and remember, this is Paul writing to this young man, Timothy, who he'd known. It was a father of the faith. Paul was a father of the faith to him. And he's encouraging him. And he compares it to these three things: a farmer, a soldier, and an athlete. Think about all three of those. There are seasons of training. There are seasons of assignment. There are seasons of rest for each of those groups of people. The soldier, it says, don't entangle yourself with the affairs of a civilian. Keep your mind focused on what the battle is or what your assignment is. There's a time of boot camp for a soldier. There's the deployment, and then there's R&R. There has to be all three of those things for you to do everything that you're meant to do, that you're designed to do. Then it talks about the athlete. And again, it's already talked about the farmer, but it talks about the athlete. We know that the athlete is supposed to compete by the rules. Well, that's part of the training, is knowing what the rules are. And then there's the physical training, and there's the mental training that goes into being an athlete. And then there's the actual race. And then after the race, there's a time of rest. There's always those three things. We find those three things together. And you and I are designed to be people who need a time of rest, we need a time of training, and we need a time of assignment. Now, I know there are a lot of people who they they just don't think they could learn to do anything better than they're already doing it. And maybe you are at the top of your game, but I encourage you to find somebody who's doing what you want to do and they're doing it well. And then just kind of go up to them and say, hey, can you help me? Could you show me some things? How do I get better at this? Or how do you handle this? So look for opportunities for a training. Look for opportunities to find out how to do better what you're already doing or what you're called to do. Then the assignment. Now, I will say this about assignment and rest. There are some people, they've rested so long that they've atrophied. Now, if you sleep too late, if you stay in the bed too long, it's harder to get up and get going. And then you kind of have to force yourself to get moving. Well, a proper amount of rest, not too much rest, not I'm going to sit down on this couch and wait for the Lord to bring me my supper for the next 50 years. That's not what's in God's heart for you. What God's heart is for you is that you have a time of training, that you have a time of assignment, and then you have those times of rest. And that's what helps you become everything you're meant to be and do everything you're meant to do. So whatever season you're in, I just hope that you will do this. Do it as unto the Lord. When you're learning a new skill, do it as unto the Lord. When you've got a new assignment or the assignment that you've had for years and years and years, do it as unto the Lord. Even when you rest, do all things. Do that as unto the Lord. Lord, I'm resting so that you can use me more. I'm resting so that I'll be more available or have more energy. Just this morning in our coffee time, one of the gentlemen was just talking about how tired he is. He can't rest. Well, when we don't rest, we don't have the ability to do everything that we want to do. So there has to be a time of rest. There has to be a time of training, and there has to be a time of assignment. I hope whatever season you're in, that God will bless you, and I will see you next Wednesday.